everyone, I'm back with another video, and this time I'm going to tell you about how my team Clichy Echecs won in the French Women's Team Championship 2022. And in the final weekend of this championship, I helped my team win this event by winning 2 games. And I'm going to tell you and show you these games. Before proceeding, I remind you to press like and leave a comment. I appreciate your support very much, and it helps me stay motivated and continue recording such videos for you. So let's go on. Let's proceed to the final weekend of the Top 12 Féminin 2022. The event took place along with the Coupe de France for the men's teams in the very center of Paris, in a very nice location, very close to the place of Concorde. You see all the cups, and you see my teammates that took part in this event. And here comes my team. Well, my team, yeah, some photos for some reason are turned around, but let me tell you more about this event, and let me show you some of the games that I played. Well, all of the games, 2 games. I played 2 games. We started with the semi-final, where my team played against a very strong team from Monaco that was led during this weekend by Elisabeth Pötz. And I'm not going to show you the whole game, although it was quite interesting, but I enjoyed mostly this moment from this game. It's like the final moments. As we can see, I was playing white, and I have a pawn up in this endgame. My knight is fighting against Elizabeth's bishop, but luckily for me, in this particular case, my knight is stronger than the bishop, well, mostly due to the fact that I have an extra pawn. Black just played bishop to h3, I played knight to d5, and actually before reaching this position, I had to calculate, I had to see what I was going to do after bishop to g2. Because if I just capture on f6, black is going to capture on f3, and it's not so clear whether I'll be able to win this game, because there are fewer pawns, and we know that the weaker side favors usually exchanging as many pawns as possible. But I had prepared a very strong move that I made in this position. I played f4, and even though I do exchange some pawns, black can take either on e4 or on f4, but it leads to losing at least 2 pawns. So if black takes on f4, I'm gonna capture with my knight, and then I'm gonna capture on h5, and there is no way for black to capture this pawn before my h pawn gets to h8. So for example, black can retreat her bishop, let's say to g6. I'm gonna capture on f6, and if she plays bishop to f7, unfortunately for this bishop, it's just impossible to guard both pawns. I can play h5, and after bishop takes c4, I play h6, and here my king controls this d3 square, and my knight controls g8 square. So there is no way for the bishop to stop my pawns from advancing forward. That's how I win. In the game, my opponent played bishop to f3, but that doesn't help, because I just play king to d3, I protect my pawn on e4, and I am ready to take on f6. If my opponent captures on f4, then I can capture on f6 or f4, on f4 probably, and after bishop d1 I can prepare knight d5. I can prepare this move by playing king to c3 first, and then playing to d5 and getting this pawn on f6. My opponent played bishop g2. In that case, I played king to e3, leaving this pawn unprotected, but again, my knight is going to take both these pawns after king takes c4, or after bishop f1. I continued the game with knight takes f6, bishop takes c4, and here many moves that win, but I decided to give a check to capture the pawn on e5, and my opponent just resigned because there's two extra pawns, they are too strong. That was a very important win because it helped my team get into the final stage. So we won in the semi-final and we reached the finals, where we played against the team of Mulhouse that actually won against a very strong team of Bischwiller in the semis. And I played white again against Sabrina Vega, the first board of the team. We played the Sicilian, but I transposed it to the Alapin line. After knight f6, e5, knight d5, it's one of the tabia of this line. My opponent opted for the line with b6. Such an option exists. It's considered to be quite a solid line for black, but I think I played well in the opening. Of course, I knew further moves, a little bit further. I knew that I can take on d5, and here if the bishop takes, I'm going to play knight c3, attacking this bishop, and if the bishop gets back, I can play d5, which is quite unpleasant for black. That's why usually black takes here with the e-pawn, but in that case, this bishop is closed on b7, the pawns are doubled, but okay, black can always take on e5 and undouble these pawns. So the main problem, the main issue is not these double pawns, but the fact that her pieces for the moment are not developed, especially the knight on b8, and it's very difficult to develop these pieces normally because, for example, after knight d7 there's always this e6 that might be quite unpleasant. My opponent played knight a6 and I made a move that is quite an often seen idea in this kind of structure, in this variation. I played h4. Well, offering my opponent to capture this pawn on h4, but after bishop takes h4, there are several ways that I can continue the game. I can just simply capture the bishop, so sacrifice this pawn and play rook d3, preparing rook h3 and preparing some kind of attack because those pieces are too far away to protect the king, and it might be not very easy for black to continue to defend the king side, but probably even stronger at this particular moment is just capture back on d6 because the queen should protect the bishop. The pawn cannot be captured back. If my opponents played bishop f6, then I can protect the pawn on d6, and actually this pawn is quite annoying because it takes control of the c7 square. This pawn is guarding the c5 square, and this knight seems to be cut off from the play. Okay, so my opponent decided not to take the pawn. She played h6, but in that case I play bishop f4, developing my bishop. And I think here my opponent made a mistake. She played knight to c7, but again, unfortunately for her, this knight is not so well placed on c7. I just captured, played knight to e5, rook f to e8, queen to h5. So you see that my pieces start to create some tension on the king side, and I always have this maneuver in mind. So for the moment, I'm playing well. My opponent is trying to protect her king side, and here I played knight to e2, preparing to get my knight to f5. So if we imagine white's knight on f5, black's position might become quite unpleasant. And the problem for black is that after knight e6, my opponent was hoping that after knight g3, knight takes d4 would be possible. It might have been very strong, but unfortunately this move just doesn't quite work because I have the move knight g4. This knight is under attack now. If she plays knight e2 check, then I'm gonna take take, and I have a discovered check, a very strong discovered check, winning an exchange with a winning position. If she plays queen to f4, then I have another combination, rook takes d4, very strong move. After queen takes d4, knight f5, here comes a fork. And if black tries to protect the rook like this, then my attack is getting to be delivered. Knight g takes h6, a very strong continuation, which of course I had to see before playing knight to e2. G takes h6, queen takes h6, and unfortunately for black, my pieces are very well placed. They are not only attacking, but they are also guarding the position of my king, keeping under control very important squares. And here black loses despite an extra piece, but just the king is too weak. Quite a nice attack. And if black plays queen to e4, then I can take with another knight on h6 and then just get back, threatening to give a checkmate. So yeah, unfortunately for black, knight takes d4 just doesn't work. My opponent spent quite a lot of time here and decided to just move away with her rook. But in that case, my knights are ready to jump. The second knight is ready to jump closer to the center and closer to the king. And that's a mystery to me why I didn't play knight f5. Here it would have been quite a logical continuation to continue with the attack, forcing the queen to go away, and then preparing rook d3, rook g3, a very nice maneuver that I mentioned before. For some unknown, mysterious reason, I decided not to play knight f5, and here I started to play pretty badly. I played queen g4, losing some time and letting black to regroup. Here again, knight to h5, and then rook a to c1 would have been very strong, but I decided to play rook d3, and then I played finally knight f5, but this queen g4 move was a little bit, well, was quite a significant waste of time. If we just move backwards a little bit now to show after queen d8 here, rook d3, what's very important that black doesn't have king f4, knight f4 because of queen g4 with double attack. And even after queen to f8, rook d3, knight f4 is possible, but it's just not working. And that's a very, very important nuance that I had to see by playing knight f5, and probably that's why I played queen g4, trying to protect the square on f4. But again, sometimes time is very crucial. I mean, most of the time in chess. Okay, and well, my opponent stabilized the position, even though her position is still worse, but it's not that significant. She can play on. Here I had to play knight f4, that would have been a better move. A3, another prophylactical move that wastes time here. And well, I let my advantage slip away almost completely, but still I had some pressure. And the 40th move, my opponent was in time trouble, and for some reason I gave a check and then just needed to get back with my queen. Instead, I could have played rook d4, improving the position of my rook and putting more pressure on the d5 pawn. As I said, I gave this check, then I realized that actually it was a bad choice, so I got back with my queen. But of course my opponent didn't play knight h7, she played queen f5, and here I made another bad move, queen to h3, just completely forgetting, preparing rook takes g7, about this knight e6 possibility, with the idea after rook takes g7 to take with the knight and protect her queen. And well, here it was already getting very hot in the playing hall, and I decided to go all in. I mean, I went to a very strange knight maneuver. I moved my knight to h4, and simply forgetting that after knight g5 I cannot really take on f5, because this pawn endgame that's gonna arise is a lost endgame. Her king is getting to my pawns, and I have a very difficult time to attack these two pawns. So I cannot take on f5. I had to play queen g3, and suddenly my opponent's position started to be winning, thanks to this pawn that's, well, that has just two moves left to become a queen. Okay, well, we were playing on seconds. I sacrificed this exchange, and luckily for me, my opponent took back almost immediately because, well, she was playing on 30 seconds, and instead she had to play d2, and knight takes g6, d1, queen loses because of knight f8, and checkmate is coming, but she can take on g5 here. After knight f8, she should play king g8, and well, it's just winning. Okay, maybe it's not that simple, because it's still here, it still seems that white has some chances for counterattack, but two queens are very strong. If I'm not checkmating black and I'm not here, the position is lost, which is the case. But luckily for me, my opponent captured back, as I said, and here is the key moment of the game. I had, well, about 1 minute to make my decision. The position is very bad, as I said, but, well, I found the strongest move. I found the only chance actually to keep the game going, to keep this battle, to forcing my opponent to find good moves, and it's very hard on seconds. I played queen to g4, a very strong intermediate move, attacking the rook, and here she had to make a choice, and she made the wrong choice. But again, it was not very obvious what to do, where to move the rook. If she moves it on the d file, I was not here, but to d5, d6, or d8, I was going to play queen e4, pinning this pawn, putting some pressure on g6, and at the same time threatening to play queen e7 at some points. But nevertheless, moving the rook to d5 would have been a better choice. And here, after queen e4, she can capture the knight, capture the pawn, and, well, still, I mean, she has an extra pawn in this queen's endgame, but I think my chances to make a draw are quite great. Instead, my opponent played rook to c7. I replied with knight f3, very strong move. Suddenly, something looking as an attack starting to happen. Check, check. Okay, it was possible to go to h6, but my opponent decided to go to g8. Well, it's equality. According to the computer, every king's retreat is possible, but king h6 I think would have been easier to make a draw. Maybe my opponent tried to still play for a win, but here I gave a check, and again I could have played queen to d4, but I was carried away by a very nice idea. I played knight e6, and after king h7 I captured on c7, and after d2, well, I'm winning here. I played knight to e6, and I thought that after d1 queen, here are the positions that I gave my social media followers to solve. It's an amazing position. In the game, I thought that d1 queen is impossible because I would just give a check, and then I would play queen h4. But actually it loses due to queen h5 with a pin. And queen g7, queen h5, queen h7, it's also not a checkmate because of queen h6. White is not lost here, however. There is a very cute perpetual, but it's not a win. I don't know what I was going to do after d1 queen. That's a mystery to me. I would, of course, play queen e7 check, king h6, and here, most likely, I would realize that queen h4 is not a checkmate due to queen to h5, and I would have 30 seconds to make a decision. But in fact, white wins here. White wins here by a quiet move, queen to f6, with a deadly threat, queen h8 checkmate. And surprisingly, despite the fact that black has two queens, there is no way to protect from this threat. Because after queen h5 check, the king goes to g3, and again, quite amazingly, but all the squares were black queens could give a check, they're under control. And even after queen g5, this exchange leads to a lost pawn endgame, because black is a pawn down. Quite an amazing position, a study-like position. And if black tries, for example, to save her king by playing queen c8, and there is another checkmate coming up. The queen is no longer on c1 to protect her king after queen h7, and it's a beautiful checkmate. So a very nice study-like position that occurred in the game. Well, not quite. I did play knight e6, but since my opponent thought that after d1 queen, she thought likewise. She thought that she was going to be checkmated. She didn't dare to promote her pawn. Also, she had to, of course. She captured the pawn on b2, but here the checkmate is coming, and it's much easier to find. So it's a check, check, and checkmate. And of course, it was very nice from my opponent to allow me to checkmate her on the board. And well, we won. We won our final match, although it was starting very well. We were pressing on almost all the boards, on 3 boards. And after my teammate Natacha BENMESBAH won her game, we made a draw on the second board. Sarah KADEMALSHARIEH made a draw. And there were 2 boards left, where me and Anaelle, my other teammates, were both pressing, and suddenly I started to make bad decisions, and I was on the verge of losing. And the 4th board was also pretty unclear, and Anaelle was fighting for a draw at the end. So at some point it started to be very shaky, but we won at the end. So that was very, of course, nice tournament, and very important for victory for my club. And we're looking forward to the next tournaments and next possibilities to play together. And I hope that you enjoyed this story about my 2 games of the final. 2 games of the final of the French Team Championship 2022 that took place in Paris in June 2022. See you very soon, guys. Take care, play chess, and win more games. That's always very agreeable. Bye.